Okay, hi everybody. Today is Tuesday, July 18th. This is the SIG Testing weekly meeting. Um, on the agenda today, Morgan just raised up a great request from the Service Catalog project, which is sort of what is the onboarding process for new projects who wish to use what we offer in Test-In for SIG testing. Is there documentation for this? What components could be used? What's the process for this, et cetera, et cetera. And I think Caleb, if you want to talk about this, you're welcome to, or I can try and scramble some tabs together real fast. Do we want to talk about the SIG tabs that have been showing up on Test Grid and the improvements that have been made there?
I can't really speak too much to the improvements, but I can certainly show the tabs.
Sure, I'll let you drive the tabs.
All right, let's see. Oh boy. Okay, test grid. That looks like the right one. Share screen. Can people see the screen?
Some tabs. I see black, unfortunately.
Oh. Well, then I guess I give up on my Linux desktop.
Okay, I'll see if I can share a screen real quick. Okay, here's Test Grid, the Test Grid that we all know and love. SIG API machinery was one of the SIGs that I think I called out during the community meeting about not having done anything with their dashboard yet. And they have since done something. Hooray, talking about this works.
Yay!
One of the things to note here, so first off, these are all the tests that SIG API machinery cares about. They got here by doing a pretty easy thing, which I believe is going on as a result of a fix-it at Google right now, where there has been movement to rename some of the end-to-end tests and include the SIG name in the test definition. So SIG API machinery did it in a way that was pioneered by Ryan Hitchman for SIG storage. Where inside of the E2E directory, there are starting to be a lot of directories that correspond to individual SIGs. So API machinery happens to have their own directory, and you can see there are tests related to namespaces and etcd failure and whatnot. And the way they prefix all of their test names with SIG API machinery is by using a function SIG describe instead of the kube describe function that's used for many other tests.
Wait, stop, go back. Why is this, why wouldn't we want a general purpose framework that tool, at least to populate for everybody else, the non-SIG? I mean, if we're gonna standardize things, it should be put in a framework, right?
Right, so I can't necessarily speak to that. Like I said, I sort of noticed that this appears to be happening organically for a number of different SIGs, including API machinery and storage, and many of them are following this pattern. There had been some conversation at one point about moving everything into its own directory and then figuring this out from the directory name, but I believe Ginkgo doesn't expose that information. Oh, Eric, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think, you know, the goal is to put everything in their own directory so that we can set up owners files to have changes get routed to someone who hopefully is associated with that SIG, so that they can actually review the change as opposed to some random, you know, test info person who has no idea what really the intent is. So that's why we're putting it into its own directory. And then right now we don't have a good way, like a test grid it's easy to filter off of the name, but there's not a great way to filter off of other information. So the most expedient way to sort of just show the SIG API machinery tests is to put that in the test name. Eventually we want to get to where there's other metadata that we could then filter off of and clean up the test names, but that's sort of the most expedient idea right now. And then yeah, in terms of, I think the idea with having it, you know, be a SIG describe in each folder is that way. So I guess the pattern is rather than having a single function in the framework directory is to put that method in each folder, so that the tests, essentially, if we move a test from SIG A to SIG B, we don't actually have to change anything. But maybe that's not the best call. I think that's sort of just the recipe that was given to people. And so that's what everyone is following.
Yeah. So Tim, you asked sort of the same question that I had asked, and the answer I got back was it's easier to filter stuff out purely by text name in TestGrid right now, and TestGrid is sort of our focus, our driving focus here. We're all really excited about each SIG having their own dashboard so that we can use this to incentivize each SIG to fix their stuff faster when it's breaking. And currently, Ginkgo doesn't expose the full path to a given test case in a way that TestGrid could consume it. So the decision was made that I really dislike stringly typed tags in test names, but in the interest of expediency, this is where we are today, and I'm very open to suggestions to carry this further. Does that sort of address your concern there? Oh, sorry, chat stuff.
It's better than before. Any progress is good.
Okay.
So we did one half of one thing, and we're starting to do the other part, which is basically association by SIG. So however that gets done at this point, I'm not going to be too critical of, so long as it gets done.
Yeah, as far as is this documented anywhere, as far as I can tell, I have asked and no. There's no overarching issue. There are a number of pull requests, and I can't promise it, but I'm trying to like sort of collate some of the information, and I could reverse engineer this into a document if we want to. I'm just sort of trying to track like because like I'm finding not a ton of consistency in some of the test names. So some things have the SIG thing at the beginning. If they follow this particular pattern, all the tests are prefixed with this, but there are other SIGs like SIG storage, which have some tests with SIG storage here, and then other tests that have SIG storage. Sorry, I'm not doing this right for the camera. On the left-hand side, prefixed, or sometimes on the right-hand side. For example, SIG storage owns some tests related to config maps, which don't currently live inside of the storage directory. So anyway, like I said, I can try and piece together more information on this if there's interest on this, but I am assuming or would be very enthusiastic if somebody from like contributor experience or somebody inside of Google who had a little more visibility into the fix-it that's going on could provide this information. I
think anything that they do is better than nothing. So I know that this is part of Michael's original proposal, right? Michael had written a proposal that I commented on, and you had commented on, and several other people did, which had this as one of the means by which to track and follow things. The one other pattern that seems to be emergence that's going on now as part of this fix-it or otherwise is that some folks are shedding E2Es in preference for integration tests. So,
I haven't noticed that trend, but if you've got any examples, I'd love to like say that is awesome.
There's a whole number of tests from scheduling that were flaky in the 1.7 cycle, and no one could figure out why.
Oh, thank God.
And they're moving them to integration tests because they're just like, we've had it. We don't want to deal with the flakes anymore.
Yay.
That is so amazing. Are they scheduler predicate tests by any chance?
They're pretty much all of the scheduler tests.
Oh,
most of them. So.
Yeah, that's really cool. If you have any examples of those to throw in the meeting notes, that would be great. I think like as a thing to like champion and highlight and say, please do more of this, that would be fantastic. Because yeah, some of the scheduling tests were the flakiest and took the longest to run too, as I recall. Okay, I want to go back to the TestGrid dashboard real fast. Eric, I think you tried to point this out to me on Friday. I'm still kind of catching up on backlog. For SIGs that still have something left to do, they get a notification on their dashboard with this to-do tab. You can see there's a description of what this tab should do exactly. They can fill that in, and the notification is telling them to please configure this. And if they click on this link, it takes them through to the configuration page, which has a really nice README now that it's continually getting improved through the efforts of Eric and Michelle and other folks to really spell out what you can do and some of the awesome options you can use to make this better. So it's been really neat to see the test grid experience improve. And I look forward to us using this in a more actionable sense. Cool. I'll stop sharing my screen with that. Okay, so Morgan, you asked a really great question before I pressed record. Do you want to maybe expand on that a little bit in terms of what would service catalog like from what we offer? Or do you
I just want to, the history of service catalog is fraught with this. We're the first to do a lot of these things. So I'm sure there's many different pieces of stuff that has been integrated into testing already. But along with, reusing some of the API server stuff and reusing some of the release infrastructure stuff, and basically being sort of this experimental cauldron of trying to figure out what Kubernetes best practices are. I just wanted to, I have an interest in testing personally, and so I just want to do basically what is the standard expected integration points compared to what we're doing, and making sure that in the future it's documented and done the right way, the Kubernetes way, the standard way, because that's basically what we've been all about from the get-go here.
Well, maybe a good starting point would be to describe like what you as a new project, what are you doing today? How far have you?
Okay, yeah, sure. So, I guess it's probably about not a year into this. I'm thinking the service broker stuff is about a year old, but this is probably, 6 or 8 months old. But, basically what do you do when you start a new project? Okay, fine. You set up your Git repository. You put some code in there. Okay, well, now the next step is I need to make sure my code runs and works. So I set up, we have Travis to check out the code and run basic unit integration tests. Is that what we should be doing? Or how can we, integrate whatever results into the standard dashboard if that's what we should be doing? I don't know. Then, okay, well, we want to make sure that our API server actually installs into a real Kubernetes deployment. So now we have a Jenkins server that makes, I think it's GKE calls or GCE calls or whatever, and injects the stuff and runs some basic end-to-end type tests where we try to start up some pods, and then we try to make some of our resources, and then we attach the resource, standard kind of stuff. Again, is there an integration point that we should be using or a result displaying? I don't know. Is all of this documented and such? And then another thing is the release management. Okay, well, we periodically have a release. Travis automatically pushes a new image each build to, I think it's Quay. And then, manually we have a button that somebody has to go in and push when we tag the build, and then push an official, V0.14 again to Quay. Is there any part of this that's part of that, or is that a completely different release infra team that we should also be integrating with? And then basically that's my perspective is we have a project. We kind of did our own thing, but the goal was not to do our own thing. Just the goal was for everything to work. And if there's something that we should be doing or that is helpful for us to look at to make sure that the next person who does it doesn't have to do this, or does it in a very standard way such that they can plug in immediately without having any problems, then I want to help with that, as well as help, specifically the service catalog do whatever needs to be done. Does that make sense? I think that's roughly a sum up there.
It does, and that sounds like probably more than we have the next 12 minutes.
Yeah, no, I don't require an answer. I just wanted to throw that out there and make sure that this was a thing that somebody would want to talk about. And I figure the people on the call are the people who would be interested in maybe answering that question. And I do not require an answer now, and I'm not in a rush. And everything is wonderful in SIG Service Catalog at the moment. I just wanted to say, hey, here we are. And I have, minute amount of time to help at times so that I can maybe start to become involved in the testing process as well,
No, absolutely. I think I'm trying to set expectations on the fidelity of my response. I think my big question up front is, it seems like today between Prow and Test Grid, we have a relatively low friction way for people to get something to do stuff based on events from their repository, to run new jobs, and to display results if you can put those results in Google Cloud Storage. All of it can be pull request driven, like setting up a Google Cloud Storage bucket for yourself and getting the scripts to actually do that in a way that are capable of running within Prow, right? Because I think the big limitation for running something within Prow is you cannot run a Docker. Eric, I'm kind of looking in your direction on this, but I believe that to run a Prow job is capable of running shell scripts, Python, Golang, whatever. It is not capable of connecting to a Docker daemon and asking that Docker daemon to Docker build, Docker run, Docker push, right? So if you want to correct me on that, Eric?
I mean, technically, so that's more of a principle of life is a lot better if Kubernetes is managing your containers, not containers have access to Docker and can do weird Docker things on the node in which they're running themselves. But theoretically, if you absolutely must do that, I suspect it'll be a big pain in the maintenance butt for you, but you can, send it the Docker socket and then your container can do whatever it wants. But I would strongly recommend against that.
I'm thinking of this in the common pattern where a project's release artifact is a Docker image that they would like to build and push to some place. And so what I'm trying to drive towards is what the friction is or level of empowerment is for using Travis versus going through our pull request driven process to set up Prow and Google Cloud Storage and Test Grid and all that stuff. And the build and push an image to a repository somewhere is the only case that I really think that it'd be cool if we could facilitate that. And I don't know if we do or whatnot. Like there's gcloud Docker push, but I don't know if gcloud Docker build and pull and stuff is a thing.
Yeah, I think we could provide a lot more automation around, supporting the multi-repo situation in general.
Multi-repos, that's another massive thing to discuss at some point. I still have Lava Lamp's doc sitting around here somewhere to go through. But to put the question back to you, Morgan, I think it's like, what drove you to Travis? What's working well for you with your existing Travis setup?
Well, it's sort of easy to set up. That's really the only thing. It was easy to set up at the time, and so boom. This was, you got to remember, this was 8 months or a year ago. It was easy to just say, okay, Travis.yaml, link it up, boom, it does its thing. There's nothing particularly inherent to the Travis process, I don't believe, that is inherent to our build beyond, if it sees a tag, it pushes an image, that kind of thing. So I don't think there's anything particularly about Travis other than it was easy to do.
Okay, and something you already knew how to do, I guess.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And everybody's heard of it, everybody's used it before, and this is a small program, it doesn't do much, or at least it started out small, doesn't do much. Now maybe we're growing bigger and require more interaction between the things, but right now we don't really have too much E2E test as it is. It's mostly unit test, integration test, and then the 50 different kinds of verification that we do and code generation that we do. That's the longest time taker.
Yeah.
That I think it's proud. It's like /cc and /assign and that kind of stuff works in the repo there. The other thing that I think we were interested in is some of the LGTM type process where right now, or at least up until about a week ago, we had sort of manual, you click, you write a review, you say, approve in GitHub, and then you say LGTM, and then you click a label that says, LGTM1, because we need 3 of them, now we need 2 of them. Is there any process set up for that? Because I think the core thing is basically 1, and then there's approvers and there's owners, and how does all that work? And is there a point that we could use that? Is that something we should be expecting to be using?
Okay, so the short version there is that plugins file, right? You can see there that you can either enable plugins on the organization level or the repo level. And so at the organization level, everything within the Kubernetes incubator organization has the display and assign thing. If you want to turn on the LGTM functionality or maybe like /kind whatever /sig whatever within your repo, you can use the label plugin. We lack documentation on what all of these plugins do right now. There is an open issue for that. But plugins are all relatively self-contained within the plugins directory that you might be able to grok what they do. And it's a pretty easy pull request process to either turn on a plugin for the incubator org if we think it's ready. Like I think the /assign, if we do not have that already. Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah, CLA and assign. Okay, I see that. Okay, that makes sense.
the /heart and /yux plugins can totally be turned on for every repo in Kubernetes. Right. So there's that. Can I get a thing to merge stuff automatically for me? I think that question is backed up behind Munge GitHub, which right now Munge GitHub is basically a deploy an instance per repository you want it to munge. And we're also, I think, probably collectively of the opinion that Munge GitHub is still operationally unfriendly and a bit of a bear. And if there were ways that we could take that functionality and translate it into Prow plugins, be a little bit happier. The LGTM process you're describing sounds a little bit more customized than what Munge GitHub currently offers. But so like Munge GitHub is the thing that handles the /approve and the assigning of things based on owners files, which I know at least the /approve thing is documented in commands.md. The rest, I believe, is all handled through Prow. And then I wanted to tie back to something else real quick just on the Travis discussion. I think that we would like to head in a direction. So right now, Prow uses one massive file called config.yaml, which is primarily used by the trigger plugin. The trigger plugin is the thing that, given a GitHub event, goes and creates a Prow job, which is either executed as a pod or corresponds to a Jenkins thing getting kicked off. And so that's just one huge file that lives in test infra. We would love to get to the world where there's a prow.yaml file in each repo that Prow is triggering, just like there's a Travis YAML file in each repo that's being executed. And then so that way you only have to edit YAML that relates to like the jobs and stuff that you want to run. So that's not to say that you can't hop into the massive config YAML that we do right now if you wanted to stand up jobs, but it just be, there's a lot of YAML in there. Eric, is there anything you want to add to all that stuff?
No.
Got it. Guy wrote down, I took a bunch of notes. So I'll look at some stuff.
Okay, much appreciated.
Let's get started. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Like I think, and then there's sort of the higher level thing that is outside of the scope of this group, but I am interested in participating in it, is that formation of like a playbook for new projects. It seems like your level of fidelity, it's just like, I kind of harp on like, it's unclear to me what the CNCF technically requires of a project to be adopted by the CNCF. It's also unclear to me what we technically require of a project to graduate from incubator to Kubernetes. Although I know there's a document and I just haven't read it yet. But if we wanted to include things like you have unit testing, you have integration testing, you have end-to-end testing, you use these tools or those tools. A checklist sort of thing would be fantastic. And then
I love checklists.
yeah, they're, hey, doctors use them, why can't we?
Not enough doctors use them, but yeah, checklists are great. Okay. Yep.
And then the other thing I have very little understanding of is your question about end-to-end tests. I think I would, again, probably have to punt over to Eric for whether or not this means we need to expand what kubetest allows us to deploy for a given cluster configuration. Because it sounds like you're talking about, I want to stand up a cluster, but then I also want to stand up some extra things in that cluster before I run the
I mean,
tests.
for EDE tests, you know, we want to have a basic cluster. We want to then run against that cluster, you know, install the API server, you know, install a Helm chart, maybe install a different Helm chart that is our broker that we're going to attach to, and then, you know, run some basic tests that, you know, use the whole infrastructure all set up. The other thing is making sure RBAC works because we need that, making sure DNS works because we need that, because we use services by name. There was one more thing, but basically RBAC is broken in Minikube, and RBAC needs to be set up in GKE, so we need to make sure that works. So we need to have a couple of little pokey kube commands that run before then. I can't remember details right now, but there was one more thing that we need to have, the cluster needs to have before it works fully for us, but it was real basic.
Okay, so maybe, because my question is more like, where is the appropriate place that code would be contributed to stand this kind of cluster up before executing the tests? And I think this would be a new scenario.
Okay.
Bootstrap. Does that sound about right?
I don't know.
Fair.
It's not me.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, were you asking me? And what was that?
Sorry. So in the context of we want to stand up a cluster and we may possibly want to run some additional kubectl commands to configure RBAC appropriately and make sure the right things are installed before we run end-to-end tests for service catalog. That sounds like we want to make a service catalog scenario rather than reusing the existing Kubernetes E2E scenario.
I can't say I've tried looking at anything that Kubernetes E2E does. I just
I
had a
think
thing. Yeah.
I mean, the two things that immediately come to mind, you know, is
Yes.
one, you can use kubetest to deploy your cluster. So like there's flags that you pass kubetest. So you could essentially say kubetest up without passing test. And then you could run whatever additional things you want to like configure RBAC or whatever, and then call kubetest test down to run tests and turn down the cluster.
Okay.
That's
I
one
think
option.
I think I'm at the point I need to look up what kubetest is. That's how basic.
Yeah, kubetest
my
is kind of
understanding is.
Another idea is there's the concept of different deployment strategies. So we have like a COP strategy, a cluster, like a bash strategy, Kubernetes Anywhere strategy. Theoretically, this could be like a new strategy, which would give you more control over like what actually happens when we turn up a cluster. You could then add your additional stuff after that. But yeah, kubetest is kind of our main launcher. That's kind of like the interface. Essentially, all of our EDE tests are called kubetest with a bunch of flags and environment variables. And we could extend that, or you could use that in a compositional way to do what's the scenario that you want.
Yeah, that's the question I was trying to ask. Because to me, it seems like the different kubetest strategies are kind of a one-to-one mapping with different places or ways to deploy Kubernetes. So there's a strategy for GKE, strategy for COP, strategy for Kubernetes Anywhere, right? And so service catalog is a thing you want to deploy for a Kubernetes cluster, no matter.
Yeah, I'm not particularly concerned about how it gets deployed. I just need a kube.
Right, and
that
so
makes any sense.
Given a kube, you then want to customize it a little bit before you then kick off tests. I think like the place to do that composition is a scenario. Is that right?
Kubetest scenario.
Maybe. Although I guess that's, I don't know. It seems fairly similar to KubeMark, right? KubeMark, you deploy a cluster and then you futz with it to make it into a bigger fake cluster. And that actually happens. They actually have some flags inside of kube test, which probably isn't the best way. I think this needs some further, thinking. I'm not. It could be a scenario that might work.
Okay, yeah, we can carry this, take this up offline. To me, it's just like it's an architectural boundaries question. I thought the kubemark scenario seemed to be like a one-to-one mapping to the Kubernetes _ provider environment variable in the bad old cluster shell script days. And that's what, sorry, not scenario strategy, I'm mixing my words, but everything that used to be a different directory in the cluster shell script days got turned into a different strategy in the kube test world. And then the scenario was, instead of a big long shell script called E2E test runner or something, it's now a Python script that calls kube test with the right set of flags instead of setting a crap ton of environment variables and then calling a magic shell script.
Cool.
So we can hash out like the right way for you to add your set of E2E tests somewhere in between that. It could be between those two boundaries, or there might be one place we can slide that in.
One last question, please. If we have one, is there basically this goes back to the whole Travis and extra environment thing. Is there a defined you guys have hardware or money or whatever that supports projects to run things, or is it, we're at the mercy of providing our own kind of infra behind the scenes to run these things? Is that?
I hear your question. That's something I'm not sure I can answer right now.
That's fine.
Right, like the technical answer is, if you were to add a job to config.yaml such that Prow would, if you set everything up so that Prow would kick off a job, that job would end up running on a Google Cloud project,
right,
by Google.
Right.
And we're all friends here. We love making sure our projects are super well tested. I think that there might be some bright, shiny future where instead of Google footing the bill for that particular project, maybe the CNCF does or something. But
right. No, yeah, because right now it's the same thing. We have a guy who works at Google, and he gives us the Jenkins. So.
Right.
Okay. So it sounds like that's what happens, and that's the answer for now. Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Cool.
That's where I wanted to check, and that's it. That's good. Excellent.
Okay. We are running long, and
Yep. Sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. I think that's all I had. Something I will try to see if I can get specific people to show up for either next week or the following week is I have a particular interest in things related to the submit queue and the build cop and test infra roles. Specifically, I'd like to get a better understanding for what those roles are responsible for. And my big unknown was like, how do I know if and when the release is blocked or at trouble? I've run into a situation where all of the COPS pre-submit jobs were failing for a 3-day window, and it was unclear. It took me a while to figure it out, and it took me a while to figure out who to ping and then how to escalate from there to make sure that the problem was actually fixed when we identified it. And we've got a problem now where one of the release blocking jobs apparently has been failing for over a week, over 2 weeks, I think. And it's a similar situation where, okay, now that we've identified it, how can we appropriately escalate this to the right individual to get fixed? We're not under release pressure today, right? Like we don't have to get 1.8 out the door today, but it still seems like we should have, and so as a result, we don't have the release team and we don't have people constantly looking at dashboards and stuff on a daily basis. But it seems like we still ought to be able to solve this problem relatively quickly once it's been noticed. So I'm trying to just, I sort of got some pain and whatnot from some of the people doing the release branch manager role and the build cop role in the past on the release team. I'd like to take some of that tribal knowledge and get some of those pain points out in the open and see if we can figure out how to improve the situation for everybody. Anyway, that's wish and hope for a meeting either next week or the following week. If you're interested, please ping me offline. And we can get some time to discuss that. With that said, I think that's it for today. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and thanks for your time.